not come at Z. I've seen through it all. Not come.
Sorry, download it.
Mo, go ahead.
Brianna, we are seeing your screen. That's not what's required.
Now what's happened?
Wait,
Others
wait,
don't
wait.
speak. Only
I'm
Mohiনী
sorry.
speak
I'm
only.
sorry. I was about to play the video. I'm so sorry. Please, we've begun the recording. We can start.
We can start? Okay. So here goes then. Good
Okay, 1
evening.
minute. Everyone, please
Share it
switch
and
off. All of you, please switch off.
Switch off your mics. All
Switch off your
right.
mics. Keep it.
Yeah.
Keep
You
your
can-
video on. But switch
Videos
off
can
your
be
mics,
on,
please.
but you Okay, so good evening, everybody. Here we are at another session of the book club. And I think in April, we are on a roll because we have authors, talking to us directly this month. So last week we had Jerry Pinto talking about his novel. Today we have Uday Kulkarni talking about his book, The Maratha Century. Now, we're very proud to have Uday with us today. Uday, thank you so much for giving us your time. We're looking forward to what you have to tell us. And I would like Mukul Ahmed to introduce the speaker to everybody to begin with.
Thank you, Mohiনী. We are indeed very privileged and very happy also to have Dr. Kulkarni with us. Privileged because here's one more addition to the book club, a person of eminence, and privileged also because Dr. Kulkarni is a fantastic combination of being a surgeon and a historian. So I will ask him at the end what takes precedence insofar as he is concerned. Dr. Kulkarni did his medical degree from the FMC and he retired from the Indian Navy as a surgeon commander. He then obtained a degree in communication and journalism from Pune University, specializing in Maratha history of the 18th century. Of his many books, he has also illustrated a book, an illustrated history, the art history of that period. It is a fantastic book, and I urge everybody to go through it. Actually, now I won't stand in the way of Dr. Kulkarni and you. I could go on and on, except to say that all the books before this are those of different Peshwas in the Maratha period, and each one is equally exciting, but I found this especially so, and I think I'll tell you at the end, depending on my questions to him, why it is like that. So Dr. Kulkarni, over to you.
Uday, we would like to see your face too. Uday, switch on the mic and the video. Uday, switch on the mic and the video.
Okay, folks, a little patience. I'm sure he's probably had a problem, but will be with us in a
With the
moment.
heavy rain. There's Uday. Uday,
Uday,
go
please unmute.
Unmute and go ahead. Unmute.
Please unmute.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Just
Everyone else, please shut up.
I'll just come in a minute because I changed my place.
What I found of special interest in the book was that not only does it tell us about the various Peshwas, the Maratha Confederacy, but also that the concept of Swaraj started with Chhatrapati Shivaji. I didn't know, and my question to him will be, how come other Hindu kings did not start this? And this is something I'd be very interested in having him
Deepak Kotwal.
answer. So now back to him. He's there, I think.
No, I just changed my place because the wave bandwidth there was very low. And they got a granddaughter at home who keeps making noise in my usual place. So I'm shifted to a quieter location, but then the bandwidth is a problem. So now I'll come back to another place. Let's see. I hope it works now.
So, Dr. Kulkarni, I have just summarized both your biodata and a little bit about the book, telling us, telling everyone, that it's a kind of culmination of, not that you're not going to write more, that was not my intention, but how what you've included in the book, with special reference to Swarajya as the concept of Chhatrapati Shivaji. And I'd be asking you about that a little more.
Yeah. So should I start my
Please.
brief? How much time do we have, by the way?
40, 45 minutes,
Okay.
as much as you like. Yeah.
So welcome everybody. Time is short, so I'll get to it, and you'll get more time for questions because of that. Now, the first thing is that the question that might come to everybody's mind is, why is it called the Maratha Century? And as we go along the talk, you'll find that between the Mughals and the British, there was a period which we can call the Maratha Empire, and therefore the Maratha period, and therefore the Maratha Century. So this book which we are discussing today was my 6th book, and the first 5 books were more or less in-depth studies of various parts of our history, starting from the year roughly around 1700. I used to start a chapter which gives a few details about the 17th century and then skip to the 1800, 1700 and beyond. So the reason I wrote this one is because I felt that most people who are going into the depth, books which are in depth, need a primer which gives an overview of the entire 175 years. And it was with that intention that I actually got into this book, which covers the period from say 1646 till even beyond 1818, when the Maratha Empire officially ended. So we begin around 1646. We find that Shivaji Raje, as he was at that time, was a 16-year-old boy growing up in his father's Jagir in Pune. And here he was taking the forts of the Adil Shahi kingdom, which were near him, and gradually kind of antagonizing the Sultanate of Bijapur. And in 1646 also, you find that this young man, he makes his first seal, which, unlike the seals of his parents, which were in Persian, is in Sanskrit. And the translation of that seal is, ever growing in splendor, like the moon of the first day of the bright half of the month, and adored by the world, this seal of Shivaji, the son of Shahji, shines for the benediction of all. So the last line gives an impression that he did not discriminate between his subjects. All his subjects, as far as he was concerned, were on par with each other. And that is one of the pillars of even our 21st century state as we understand it today. Now, at the same time, he was the first one to raise the banner of Swaraj. And so why was this cry for Swaraj raised at that time? So I'll just quote an Irish patriot, and I think it was also quoted later on by Dr. Ambedkar, when he said that no man can be grateful at the cost of his honor. No woman can be grateful at the cost of her chastity. And no nation can be grateful at the cost of its liberty. So the situation at that time, at least in the region that he had inherited as his Jagir, was that the people living in that region were feeling discriminated against. And that raw ethos which you find in the 17th and 18th century, you cannot understand probably in the 21st century, where we have far more sophisticated ideas about liberty, equality, and so on. But it was past we have to face after 75 years of independence, and we cannot paper over the fissures that existed in our history, not that we have to transport them into the 21st century. And at the same time, we have to treat history with the gentleness that it deserves, and we have to study it as dispassionately as possible, because like a doctor sees a patient without getting involved with him, I would say. Similarly, the person who studies history has also to look at it with a certain amount of dispassionate and as factual a mode as possible. At the same time, what many people feel is that it is history's job to cement the fissures in a nation. Actually, it is not a history's job to build or bind a nation. If you want to know history, we have a very regional history, we have a very federal history, we have a very communal history, we have a very bloody history in our past. And if at 75 years after independence, I think it is time that we look at it as it happened, rather than either papering over that it was all very nice and it was a sanitized view that you want to see today, or you give a Delhi-centric view, which is what has been happening all these years. So now we're coming back to Swarajya. You find that the medieval era before Shivaji Raje came on the scene in 1646 was quite different. It was, as I said, full of discrimination, which was based on the ethnicity, the faith, the language, the region, and so on. And even as a few decades ago, a professor from Aligarh Muslim University, Professor Athar Ali, he came out with 2 books which discuss the Mughal nobility under Akbar and Aurangzeb, where he has given a detailed list of the echelons of government as they existed that time. The Mansabdari, for example, the people with the 7,000 mansabs, the 6,000 mansabs, the 5,000 mansabs, and you find that all these mansabs were reserved for people who came from the Turani or the Irani ancestry. And the second echelon of that was the Indian Muslims. And then after that came the Rajputs and so on, who were at the lower echelons of these Mansabdari hierarchy which existed at that time. Besides this, the court language was Persian, which was palpably foreign even at that time, and it remains foreign to this day. The regime had a state religion, which was again Islam, and it was not a secular state by any means. And there was an accelerated promotion system for those who subscribed to the royal faith. So there was a despondency amongst those who chose not to do so. And even the later orders of the time of Aurangzeb, at first not to repair temples, not to build temples, and finally to demolish temples. Of principal temples, examples, of course, we all know, Kashi or Mathura, or closer at home, even the temple at Trambakeshwar. So this is where it all began. And this call for Swarajya, which was given by Shivaji Raje, has been given only one other time in our history, which was when it was Lokmanya Tilak who said Swarajya is my birthright. And both times it was perceived by the people at on the spot, on the ground, that we are living under some kind of foreign domination, foreign rule, or some kind of slavery. That is why this urge for own rule or Swarajya was asked for. Now, I won't go into the details of how the Swarajya was built up. In this year, in fact, is the 350th year of the coronation of Chhatrapati Shivaji in 1674. And that is when a fresh wave of freedom started. He expanded his kingdom right up to the Kaveri in the south. And after his death, you find in 1682, because one of Aurangzeb's sons rebelled against him and came into the Deccan, Aurangzeb chased him and came down here with a huge army. And that was in 1682. And he remained here till 1707. And in those 25 years, the entire war in India was fought in this Deccan plateau. And that is in the first 2 or 3 years, you find the kingdoms of Bijapur and the kingdom of Golconda were extinguished, the monarchs put in prison or put to death. And from the Maratha side, Chhatrapati Sambhaji was captured, very cruelly put to death. And at that point, probably the Mughal emperor thought that he has achieved what he wanted to. All the 3 main adversaries which he had in the Deccan had been extinguished and the kings had been put away. But that was actually the spark which ignited this entire resurgence in the Maratha kingdom. Until 1707, there was no rest for Aurangzeb as long as he was in the south. And though his generals kept telling him that we have achieved what we had to, let's go back to Delhi. They were tired of going from place to place, following him. But he did not let them go back. He continued his fight till his death, 1707. And that was when he died in Ahmednagar, near Ahmednagar. So then we come to the 17th century, 18th century, and we find that this momentum which the Marathas had built up in this 25-year-long war, which was fought for preserving their freedom, preserving their kind of, which people had got used to in Chhatrapati Shivaji's time. That momentum carried them across the Narmada into what is those days and even today considered as Hindustan. And it was then they started entering the Mughal Sobhas and returning them in kind, laying those areas waste and claiming those territories. And this was the transition. The 18th century, the early 18th century was a period of transition. And you have to understand that the authors who describe the Marathas were ravaging those lands, were essentially doing what was done to them just a few decades earlier. And the idea was that to put the pressure on the monarch in that place, or the Subedar of the Mughals who were ruling that place, to hand over that province to the Marathas, which progressively happened as the century went on. The Maratha aim was always to gain control of Delhi. And towards this, you'll find letters as early as the last decade of the 17th century. Chhatrapati Rajaram writes a letter when he's under siege at the fort of Jinji in the south, that I've kept aside 300,000 hone for the capture of Delhi, when he probably didn't have that money with him. So this was an ambition, right, from Chhatrapati Shivaji's time, his son's time. And this was, you see that thread going all through the 18th century, that Delhi was the focus at all points in time. And in 1708, when the war of succession began after the death of Aurangzeb, Shahu was for 18 long years. Shahu was the son of Chhatrapati Sambhaji, and he was in prison, in the Mughal prison for 18 long years when the fort of Raigad was captured in 1689. And he was released with a point of view that he will engineer a division within the Maratha ranks. Because at that time, Rajaram's widow, who was Tarabai, she was managing the state of affairs in the Maratha kingdom. And it was hoped that his release will, and to a certain extent, she did succeed. And there were two divisions in the Maratha state which exist till this day, the one at Satara and one at Kolhapur. Now, Shahu had to first establish himself as a king, and not having been of a martial disposition, not having been trained in administration or war in the 18 long years that he spent in the Maratha camp, he needed men to help him. And one of the first people who came to help him was the Senapati, who was Dhanaji Jadhav, who actually helped him to win his first battle against Tarabai's forces at Khed, just north of Pune. And then other people like Khando Ballar Chitnis and Balaji Vishwanath Bhatt, who had come over from the Konkan onto the plateau, Deccan plateau. These all people helped him. And you'll find that on the other hand, the Mughals kept on imploding. With the death of Bahadur Shah, who was the son of Aurangzeb in 1712, just 5 years after Aurangzeb, there was anarchy in Delhi and Lahore, actually, where that event happened. And you find that the next lot of Shahzabas fight with each other, and the Wazir becomes the kingmaker from 1712 onwards. And first it was Zulfikar Khan, and then there were two brothers called the Sayyid brothers of Bara. And these Sayyid brothers finally install Farrukh Siyar on the throne, who again remains as their puppet. Now Farrukh Siyar wants to throw off the yoke of the Sayyid brothers. And on the other hand, Farrukh Siyar divides these two brothers, keeps one as the Wazir in Delhi and sends the second, Hussain Ali, as the Viceroy of the Deccan. Now Hussain Ali decides that he will take the help of the Marathas to overthrow Farrukh Siyar. And within 12 years of the death of Aurangzeb, you find that the Marathas have agreed to help Hussain Ali march with a large army to Delhi, help him overthrow the emperor who was opposing him. And in 1719, a 30,000 strong Maratha army is in Delhi with the Peshwa, the Senapati, a young Bajirao, and Farrukh Siyar is overthrown and a new puppet emperor is put in his place. And the Maratha demands were that they should be given the sanads of taking the Sardeshmukhi, the Sauthai from the 6.5 Subas of the Deccan, plus their Swarajya must be recognized. Swarajya meaning all the areas which had been captured once upon a time or which were under the control of Chhatrapati Shivaji, right up to Bangalore and Tanjavur. So that was the demand which was granted. And Chhatrapati Sambhaji's wife, Yesubai, who was in the Mughal prison again for 30 long years, she was released. And a lot of Kutum Kabila who had gone with them, they were also released along with that. And with all those people, Balaji Vishwanath came back to Satara in 1719. And Chhatrapati Shahu obviously was very grateful to him. In fact, there's a letter in which he refers to him as Atul Parakrami Sevak, the servant of incomparable ability. And when he died in 1720, a 19.5-year-old Bajirao was automatically anointed as the next Peshwa, though he was very young, very immature, and there was a lot of opposition to his appointment by the people in the other ministers in the court. But Shahu said if he doesn't prove himself to be able, we can always remove him at any point in time. And the first 6 or 7 years of Bajirao, you find he is going all over the place, getting a feel of things, getting a feel of the lay of the land. You find him going to Malwa, he goes to Marathwada, he goes to the south to Srirangapatnam, and all these campaigns, he's learning all the time. And then he finds that the Nizamul Mulk, who has come down to the Deccan, and was kind of formed his own autonomous kingdom at Aurangabad. He is the main adversary which his king or his kingdom has. On the other hand, the Nizam was very keen that Chhatrapati Shahu as well as the king at Kolhapur, was Chhatrapati Sambhaji, should both come under his control. And this, the only man who seemed to be opposing this was Bajirao, who was the prime minister of Chhatrapati Shahu. And the Nizam, when he began his march towards Pune and Satara, it was Bajirao who was called upon by sovereign when he was campaigning down south to come and help him. And you find Bajirao coming to Satara and then his brother taking the sovereign to the fort of Purandar, and Bajirao leaving Pune, which was just a small village that time. Nobody really cared about whether Pune is taken by the Nizam or not. And you find him heading for Aurangabad, almost as if he's going to attack Aurangabad. And then he makes a feint around that town and goes towards Jalna. And then he pretends as if he's going to attack Burhanpur, which is another very important Mughal city in the Deccan at that time. Seeing this, the Nizam leaves Pune and heads towards Burhanpur. And then Bajirao leaves Burhanpur and goes further into Gujarat. And then the Nizam comes back to Pune. This whole campaign, which was going on of cavalry movements, which lasted for about 7 or 8 months, has been labeled by Field Marshal Montgomery as a masterpiece in strategic mobility. Because the next time Bajirao starts coming south towards Aurangabad, the Nizam starts
You're frozen.
First day he sends his bazaar ahead. Second day he crosses over his infantry, and the third day artillery is going to cross over. So the first day when the Banjaras in the bazaar cross over, you find Bajirao's men come and chase them all off. The second day when the Nizam's army crosses, they are all surrounded on all sides and cut off from food and water. And the artillery is not allowed to cross the river. And within 3 days, this most powerful chief of the Mughals is forced to surrender and give up his claims towards being the person who will be the representative of the emperor in the south, and he accepts all the demands of Bajirao and he signs a treaty in 1728. This battle of Palkhed actually is a watershed in Bajirao's career, because that is when he becomes known all over the country that the man who had never been defeated, a senior experienced general like the Nizam, he wins a bloodless victory over him. So 1728 is a point in Bajirao's career when he kind of breaks the shackles and becomes an independent general in his own right. He never got support from the people who were other old nobility of the throne. He never got support from them. So he depended on his younger brother, Chimaji Appa, and he raised his own Sardars like the Scindias and the Holkars. They're all creations of Bajirao. And along with them, because the south was no longer the target, his aim was to attack Delhi, as his famous quote, which is often mentioned, that you attack the trunk of the tree and the branches will come down by themselves. So he told Shahu that I will take your kingdom right up to Delhi. And that aim, he went by entering into Malwa and Gujarat and Bundelkhand. So his brother Chimaji Appa, in the very next year after Palkhed, you find he enters Malwa. Now Malwa is a very strategic province, practically today's Madhya Pradesh, because it used to connect the Hindustan in the north with the Deccan. And the other sides in the east were all jungles. So you had to traverse through Malwa to come south. So capturing Malwa was a very important strategic objective of that time. So Chimaji Appa goes to Malwa. He has a battle near Dhar at a place called Amjera with the Mughal governor. And that 3-hour battle, frontal battle, the Mughal governor Subedar is killed. And then he lays siege to Ujjain, which was the then capital of Malwa. And from that point onwards, practically, Malwa becomes a de facto Suba controlled by the Marathas, though the Sanad which awards Malwa to the Marathas took another decade to come through. De facto, they started controlling Malwa. Gujarat was also captured at that time. Chimaji also went on several campaigns there. Abhay Singh was the ruler of Jodhpur, was the Subedar. He was evicted from that place and Gujarat was taken over. And Bajirao in 1730 went to Bundelkhand, famously to assist Chhatrasal, who was the ruler there. And he defeated Muhammad Khan Bangash, who was the Subedar of Allahabad, who had crossed the Jamuna and come down to try and take Bundelkhand. In fact, the battle between Chhatrasal and Bangash was going on for a very long time. So again, Bajirao got Bangash trapped in a fort, placed a siege around the fort, starved them out. And the description, even in Mughal newsletters, very interesting, that anything that moves was food. That's how badly they were starving. And finally, they were allowed that if you leave your weapons and go away from here, we will let you go. We will not slaughter you. And all those people were left alone and they went back. Muhammad Khan Bangash said that you will never cast your eye on Bundelkhand again. On that condition, you will be let off from there. And he was let off from there. So these 3 years, 1728, 1730, you find a letter by one of his very chief officers, Pilaji Jadhav Rao. Our ream has touched the Yamuna. That's what the letter says. So from the Yamuna to the Tungabhadra was an expansion which took place in this short decade of 1720 to 1730. And thereafter, the next aim which he had was to not only get the formal cession of Malwa, but he started asking the emperor for even the south of Bengal and the Indo-Gangetic belt, the Subas of Ajmer and Agra and so on. Towards this, first his mother went on a pilgrimage. And that pilgrimage was a projection of power. It was called Radhabai's pilgrimage. And this old lady, she first went to Udaipur and she went to Jaipur, where she was received very kindly and she was hosted for almost a month. And then from there, escorted by the rulers there to Mathura. And from Mathura, she was picked up by Bajirao's old enemy, Muhammad Khan Bangash, who said Bajirao's mother is like my mother. And from Mathura, she was escorted to Kashi and Gaya and these places. And doing that pilgrimage, she all comes back to Maharashtra. And after she comes back, Bajirao heads for Rajasthan, where he starts a diplomatic exchange with the Mughal king, Muhammad Shah, asking him to cede Malwa and to give the south of all these places in the north. Now, the ruler of Jaipur was trying to co-opt Bajirao into the Mughal scheme of things. And therefore, he advised the Badshah that let's give Bajirao what he wants and get him to defend the Mughal empire for us, rather than keeping him as an adversary. So these are the first signs you find that one-time adversaries, the Mughals and the Marathas, suddenly find something in common. And they feel that because the Mughals had grown very weak and the Marathas were the resurgent kind of a power that was going on at that time. So in 1737, when Muhammad Shah does not cede Malwa, because there are two camps in his darbar, one of which is totally against co-opting Bajirao towards this. You find in 1736, he says, I will go to Delhi and show the emperor that the Marathas can reach your capital. To stop him from coming there, 3 huge Mughal armies under the Wazir Kamruddin Khan against the Nawab of Awadh, Sadat Ali Khan, and the Khan Doran. These 3 people with 3 large armies of almost 100,000 people are to the south of Delhi. A small skirmish in the Dwab of the Ganga and Jamuna, you find Mallara Holkar is chased off. And when Mallara Holkar returns to Bajirao, Sadat Ali Khan, who had defeated that small bit of army which had been gone across the Jamuna, he writes to the emperor that I have defeated Bajirao and sent him south of the Chambal. Now, without verifying these facts, you find that the Badshah gives a lot of honors to Sadat Ali Khan, sends him a robe of honor and so on and so forth. And Bajirao writes to his brother. There's a long letter dated 5th of April 1737, where he writes to him that Sadat Ali has made the Badshah believe something which is false. Now, there are 2 ways of showing the king, the emperor in Delhi, that what has been told to him is false. One, either I sink Sadat Ali in Agra, where he's sitting, or I go to Delhi and show that I am there at his doors. So he said that Sadat Ali is very well entrenched inside Agra fort and he won't come out. And in fact, all the 3 Mughal commanders were actually having a party, thinking that we have pushed Bajirao south of the Chambal. At this time, with about 30,000-40,000 people on cavalry traveling about 40 to 50 course, one course is 3 kilometers per day on horseback, he finds a small channel of about 8 miles between all these Mughal armies, and staying close to the Mewati hills on the western side, you find this man reaching Delhi on the 27th of March. He reaches Delhi and he writes to his brother later on that I camped at a place called Kushbandi. And the next day was on 30th was Ram Navami actually. 29th March he reached there. And Ram Navami, there's a big fair outside the temple of in Delhi, the Kalkaji temple. So to announce his arrival, He goes to the Kalkaji temple, he sends some men there, and he just roughs up a few pilgrims who have come there, takes away a few horses and camels, and they all go running back to Delhi and inform the emperor that the Marathas are in Delhi, which nobody was willing to believe, because with 100,000 strong army to the south of Delhi, how did this man reach here? Was the first question that everybody asked. So they sent a spy. They sent a spy to check whether the Marathas have reached there. And this spy disguised himself as a beggar, and he went to the Maratha army. And around midnight, he came back to the Darbar and he showed what arms he had got from the Maratha army, which was consisting of some dry bhakri, dry bread, Maratha bread, and some gram. So looking at that bheek which he got, everybody knew this is a staple diet of a Maratha trooper. So the Marathas are in Delhi. Now, with the main armies being about 100 miles, 100 kilometers south of Delhi, they mustered up a small army. And out of that, there was one experienced captain called Amir Khan. He said that don't attack these people. They are far too powerful for us to face. But a young man, Koka Khan, said that no, this is my chance for glory. And with 5,000 or 6,000 people, he charged at Bajirao's army. So Bajirao sent one of his generals ahead, one of his chiefs ahead. And then when this man came, he started withdrawing as if he's retreating. And this guy chased him and went closer to Bajirao's army, where they were all cut down. And that was a tragedy which befell this small army, which inexperienced army, which attacked him there. Then he goes to Palam. There's a village which is now today the airport there. And he writes to his brother later on that I could have burnt the suburbs of the city of Delhi. But Delhi is a Mahasthal. That's what he calls it. And burning the suburbs of the city would break the cord of diplomacy. The emperor himself is desirous of a treaty with me. He wants to cede Malwa to me and make me the deputy subedar there. But there are elements in his darbar which don't want to do it. My intention of going there was only to show him that I can reach Delhi. And here you find an example of the adage that war is diplomacy by other means, which was actually practiced by this man. And again, one more battle which he fights, whether it is the Nizam at Palkhed, whether it is Bundelkhand, where he defeats Bangash, and now at Delhi, which he attacks, and he doesn't attack a defenseless city. In fact, that was the first attack on Delhi since Akbar came there in 1556, after the second battle of Panipat. So 180 years, this capital had never seen an enemy at its doorstep. And then he comes to know that Kamruddin Khan was the Wazir, hears that Bajirao is in Delhi, and they start coming towards Delhi. And with a small force, he goes off towards Kotputli in Rajasthan and returns. So this made an impact. This dash to Delhi made an impact. And this impact was not only in India, but it made an impact outside India, because next 2 years, you find Nadir Shah from Persia hearing of the weakness of the Mughals and planning an attack on India. And some of the people in the Mughal court themselves, like the Nizamul Mulk is considered to have invited Nadir Shah to come to Delhi, come to India. And when Nadir Shah comes, he comes up to Karnal. He finds that the Mughal army is so disorganized that he sends a letter to Muhammad Shah, what is this? I expected at least one person to fire at me. And an army is sent which does not organize itself well, and is practically surrounded by Nadir Shah, and all the chief captains are captured. The emperor himself is taken into custody. He's called for dinner and not allowed to leave. So Sadat Khan, who is the Nawab of Awadh, says that I will promise you that if you come to Delhi, I will give you 2 crore rupees. Now, this was too good an offer to refuse. And Nadir Shah, who was probably expecting a few lakh rupees as ransom, and he would have returned from there, when he hears that he'll get 2 crore rupees, he comes towards Delhi. And Sadat Khan comes there before him. He finds he cannot raise the 2 crore rupees, and he commits suicide before Nadir Shah reaches there. Nadir Shah reaches there, he wants his money, and his soldiers start running, ransacking the whole place. Somebody fires a shot at Nadir Shah when he's sitting at a Suneri masjid in Chandni Chowk, and he unsheaths his sword, which is signal for his men to start a massacre in Delhi. And the massacre goes on for a few days until finally the emperor himself comes to him begging that please sheath your sword and stop the massacre, and I will give you whatever you want. And whatever loot he takes back to, including the peacock throne, the Kohinoor, everything is taken back from there. And at that time, the Marathas are busy fighting with the Portuguese at Vasai in 1739. So everybody is urging Bajirao, and Bajirao is impatiently waiting at Burhanpur for the Vasai war to get over so that he can proceed to the north. And there are letters which say that who will take over the Gaddi of Delhi because Muhammad Shah has been deposed. So the talk then is that the Rana of Udaipur will be made the king, and the city will be captured by using the army which Bajirao will lead there. But 4th of May, Vasai is taken, and 5th of May, Nadir Shah begins his journey back to Iran, so that and replaces Muhammad Shah on the throne. Now, anticipating a question which might come up, that why did the Marathas not take over the throne of Delhi? There's a very clear-cut letter written by Chhatrapati Shahu that I have got no desire to sit on the throne of Delhi. For one, Delhi was not a power center for the Marathas. They could not have sustained their rule sitting in Delhi. And therefore, he was not desirous of going there. Secondly, he wrote a letter that I would rather repair a dilapidated structure rather than building a new one. By his own good fortune, Muhammad Shah has been given back his throne, and we will support him as the Amirul Umrah of the kingdom. So that's what the attitude of the Marathas and their sovereign was. And that remained for the rest of the century. They decided that they will let the Mughal reign while it will actually be the rule of the Marathas. If you can differentiate between the reign and the rule, these two words. So there was always a titular Mughal king there. And of course, in 1740, when Bajirao had suddenly died, you find his son, again 19-year-old Nana Sahib, again favored by Shahu because of work done by his father and grandfather, is appointed as the Peshwa. Again, against the resistance of several other people in the Darbar. And a totally new chapter opens in Nana Sahib's time. The whole Indian topography changes. Bengal, a new usurper comes there and overthrows the dynasty of Murshid Quli Khan. Alivardi Khan comes there. Tanjore is threatened by the Nawab of Arcot. So an army led by Raghuji Bhosle goes south to defend Tanjore. And he fights the Nawab of Arcot, takes the fort of Trichinapalli. The people who are defeated at Bengal come running to Nagpur asking Raghuji Bhosle, please come and help us get back the power which we have lost by the usurper Alivardi Khan. So the Bengals enter Orissa and Bengal from Nagpur. Raghuji Bhosle sends his armies there every year for the next 10 years until Alivardi Khan finally is unable to stand the annual invasions and agrees to pay 12 lakh rupees south to the Marathas in 1751 and 1751 to 1757, when the Battle of Plassey took place. You find every year 12 lakh rupees paid by the Nawab of Bengal to the Bhosles of Nagpur. Now, these things are happening simultaneously all over the place. The Anglo-French rivalry begins in the south, in the Carnatic Wars. And the French first discover that we are able to defeat an Asiatic army which is 10 times our size because we have got superior firepower and better organization of our armies. So all these things are happening at this 1740 to 1750 decade. And the man who was actually at the helm, Chhatrapati Shahu, he becomes old. He has got no son of his own. Chhatrapati Sambhaji of Kolhapur has no son of his own. And the real problem starts looming ahead of who will succeed after the death of these two people. And in 1750 to 1752, you find the Peshwa is very busy trying to sort out, because he's at that stage the person who is aware of the politics which are taking place all over India. But there are some people who are opposed to him, and he has to fight those battles to get back the control of whatever is happening in the kingdom. And there are also two letters by Shahu which I've put in a book where he says that you will take over the kingdom and you will follow the next Chhatrapati. So that extremely difficult period went on for a year or two. He also has a few fights. The new Nawab, the new Nizam, two Nizams are assassinated in those after the Nizamul Mulk dies in 1748. A lot of turbulent period goes through. They go through. Ahmad Shah Abdali begins attacking India in 1748. In 1752, when he takes Punjab, and the Wazir is defeated by the Rohillas, who are actually the Afghans settled in India. The Wazir comes rushing to Scindia and Holkar asking for his help. The Wazir is helped, the Rohillas are defeated, and the Wazir signs a treaty along with the emperor asking for the Marathas to be the protectors of the Mughal king against all internal and external enemies, in exchange for which they are given several subas as for looking after this place. So here you find in 1752 an agreement called the Ahadnama is signed by the emperor and Scindia and Holkar on behalf of the Peshwa, offering to protect the Mughals. And this protection of the Mughals, this promise which the Marathas made, was 9 years later to lead to the Battle of Panipat. Because in 1757, 1753 to 55, the Marathas again went north. They went to Kumer, they went to Delhi, they went to Jodhpur. They had multiple battles over there. Raghunath Rao and Mallara Holkar, Jayappa Scindia, they were all in their army. In 1757, Abdali came back because there was a cry that the Jats and the Marathas have become so powerful in North India. There's a cleric who was in Delhi called Shah Waliullah. There are many letters written by him. He wrote to Ahmad Shah Abdali that soon in North India, you will not hear the sound of azan anymore because all these people are coming here and they've taken over these territories. So you please come here and save us from these people, push them to the south. So in 1757, you find Ahmad Shah Abdali coming to India. He ransacks Delhi. A small army of 5,000 Marathas are in Delhi at that time. A few Jat armies there at that time. And both these are too tiny for standing up to the huge Afghan army. They are both defeated. Delhi is completely ransacked. Every Haveli and every palace is dug up for wealth. In fact, the chroniclers of that time have written that when Abdali went back to his kingdom, he carried away so much wealth and on so many different kinds of animals that he did not leave behind even a washerman's donkey in Delhi. That is the extent to which Delhi was looted in 1757. But he did not stop at just getting money from Delhi. The Rohillas were his chief allies because they were his countrymen once upon a time. And they said that now is the time when you must go down further south. You must teach Surajmal Jat, the Jat ruler, a lesson. You must go further down to Mathura and Vrindavan. All the pilgrims have come to celebrate Holi, and you must carry out a holy war there. So there are reams written about that attack on Mathura and Vrindavan, where Abdali is offering for every head cut and brought to him, he offers 5 rupees and 3 rupees, that kind of thing. And it is said the waters of the Yamuna ran red for several days until the Indian summer came to the rescue of the people there, and an epidemic of cholera broke out in Abdali's camp, and he had to wind up his affairs and come back to Delhi. And in any case, he never liked to stay in India in the hot summers. So after winding up his Mathura and Vrindavan attack, he went back to his homeland. Now, following his return, he handed over Delhi to his chief lieutenant, Najib-ud-Dawla, who was again the Rohilla chief of Najibabad, which is beyond the Ganga. And at that time, you find Raghunath Rao and Mallara Holkar coming to the north, and they capture Delhi. And in fact, for some time, even Najib-ud-Dawla falls into their hands. But he pleads with them that I will help you if you let me go. I'm like your son. That's what he tells Holkar. And he is let go that time. And though Raghunath Rao at that time was against it, he used to go to the river every day for a bath. And on the way, he used to find that Najib's army was camped there, and he used to find the cows had been slaughtered on the way, which Raghunath Rao could not tolerate. So he was urging Mallara Holkar, let's attack this man and finish him off. And Mallara Holkar has been reported to hold the reins of his horse and said, your father would have listened to me. Because Mallara Holkar was from Bajirao's time, 1720 onwards, was the Maratha army, and stopped that attack on Najib-ud-Dawla. Letting Najib-ud-Dawla go was one of the most costliest errors which the Marathas made that time, because he was the man who was the architect of the next battle at Panipat, which took place. Now, from there, they entered the Punjab. From Punjab, there was Abdali's son was there, Taimur, at Lahore. He was chased off from Lahore with his general. Those people crossed the Ravi river and went away. They captured Lahore. They had sent armies and captured Multan and Attock and Peshawar. And these 4 cities, which are today in Pakistan, were under Maratha control for a period of at least 18 months. And there you find Raghunath Rao gets a letter from the Shah of Iran. Now I'm going something which is far beyond what is written in this book, where the Shah of Iran tells Raghunath Rao that between you and me, let us crush Abdali, and you can take Kabul and I will take Kandahar, which is, Abdali was the father of Afghanistan actually. So Raghunath Rao writes to the Peshwa in Pune that why should we give Kabul to the Persians? Because until 100 years back, even Kandahar was part of India. It was lost to the Persians in Shah Jahan's time. So why should we hand over these two? Even Kabul, we should hand over. So this was the confidence which the Marathas had in 1758, while Abdali was facing a lot of rebellion, not only in Afghanistan, but also from the Baluchistan. And he was not expected to survive that rebellion against him. He did. When Raghunath Rao came back and Dattaji Shinde went north, you find that Dattaji's depends on Najib-ud-Dawla to help him build a bridge across the Ganga. He was given 3 tasks. One is to fortify the border at Punjab, 2 to cross over the Ganga and go east, because 1757 Plassey had happened and Bengal was taken over the English. So Nanasaheb Peshwa tells him, from there you go east, take Shuja-ud-Daula's help. In exchange, you offer Shuja-ud-Daula the post of Wazir of the Mughal kingdom, and you ask him to, in exchange, give us the places of Kashi and Prayag, which are with him, which are in his rule. And then taking him along, go to Bengal, which is the place which is the richest province of India in those days. However, all this did not happen, because when he depended on Najib-ud-Daula to help him cross the Ganga by building a bridge, Najib-ud-Daula built the bridge, but he came on this side of Ganga and built a fort and defended it against Dattaji's attack. Meanwhile, he sent emissaries to Ahmad Shah Abdali, inviting him, please come here and help us against the Marathas. So, unknown to them, a huge army from Afghanistan, about 60,000 people, poured into the Punjab through the Bolan and Khyber passes, and they came down there. About 1,000, 2,000 posts which were there in all these cities were defeated. Lahore was taken back. And Dattaji had to abandon the battle with Najib-ud-Daula, cross back across the Jamuna and face Abdali. Now, Abdali didn't want to fight with Dattaji. He just had a small skirmish, crossed the Jamuna, went back and joined with Najib Khan. So you can imagine the geography of that place, that there are 2 armies on each side of the Jamuna coming towards Delhi. Abdali on the northern bank of the Jamuna and Dattaji Scindia on the southern bank, and both were trying to protect. One was trying to attack Delhi, the other was trying to protect Delhi. And finally, on the Makar Sankranti day of 1760 was the time when they began to cross the river of Jamuna at a place just north of Delhi. Dattaji Shinde went to defend it and was killed in the battle. And a month later, you find Mallara Holkar in a separate battle is defeated by Abdali. And seeing this scenario in the south, they had won a famous victory over the Nizam in 1759. You find that the Marathas are forced to send a huge army north under Sadashivrao Bhau, who had never been to the north earlier, with a big artillery contingent which had just come over from the Nizam to their side, led by Ibrahim Khan Gardi. Now, this contingent went ahead. They have hoped that they will get allies, but the Rajputs refused to help them. The Nawab of Awadh, who was a Shia, decided that he will throw his lot with Abdali, who was a Sunni, rather than helping the Marathas, because once upon a time, Shuja-ud-Daula's father, Safdar Jung, was the Wazir and had been helped by the Marathas. So the Marathas felt that Shuja-ud-Daula will help them, but he did not. He joined Abdali. And the Jat ruler, Surajmal Jat, came as long as Delhi was captured. And then he said, you hand over Delhi to me. If you hand over Delhi to me, I will remain with you, which Sadashivrao Bhau absolutely refused. And therefore, Surajmal Jat also left them. Delhi was a barren conquest because there was no money in Delhi, there was no food in Delhi. In fact, there was an additional liability of feeding the royal family, which cost them about 1.5 lakh rupees per month. And their own money had been exhausted by that time. So the monsoon months of 1760, they had to spend in Delhi, feeding their own men, feeding the royal family, spending a lot of money. The Saukars would not give them any loan because they were wondering who's going to win. Who's going to, between these two powers, Abdali sitting on the other side of a flooded Yamuna, Sadashivrao Bhau with the Marathas in Delhi, and who's going to win? We'll pay the dues to them. Why should we pay them before the battle takes place? So at the end of the monsoons, the beginning of the Navratra, the traditional day when the Marathas used to go on a campaign, you find them heading towards the north, going to Kunjpura. Kunjpura is a place near Karnal. It's a fort where 6,000 Afghans were waiting for the flood of the Yamuna to come down, cross over and join Abdali. And it was amply provided for, a lot of wealth, a lot of food grains and so on. So they attacked Kunjpura and they got a lot of grains. They, in fact, the people who had killed Dattaji Shinde, they found those people, they killed them also. The elephant of Dattaji, which had been taken away. All these were emotional scenes, getting back that loot which was there from Kunjpura. But seeing this, Abdali was stung to the quick that his men are getting slaughtered here. The Afghans are getting slaughtered at Kunjpura. And me, the king of the Afghans on the other side of the flooded Yamuna, is unable to come to their help. So he starts moving north. And looking at the map of the Jamuna, you find he comes to Bagpat. And at Bagpat, he tells the Gujars, who are the wayfinders, that you people are not able to tell me a way to cross the flooded river. So a village named Gauripur, just near Bagpat, he's told that the river is shallow over here. And he crosses the river there. A lot of elephants and a lot of men and horses are all swept away in the currents, but he manages to go across. And when he goes across, that time from Kunjpura, the Marathas were going further north, hoping to cross the Jamuna further north and coming to grips with Abdali in the Doab. But when Sadashirao Bhau heard that Abdali is already crossed over, he turned back and started coming south. And he stopped at Panipat. Abdali came north from Sonpat, and 3 corps from Sadashirao Bhau's army stopped there. Because when he saw the array of the Maratha guns which were put there, he decided not to attack. And this stalemate continued for the next 2.5 months, both sides trying to cut off each other's supplies. Finally, the Marathas, who were actually fighting the foreign land, because the Rohilas were nearby, Shujauddaulla's land was nearby, and they could provide for the army which Abdali was commanding. And in 14th of January, they had to go and fight the battle because they were starving. They really had no food left. They had their last bit of food the previous night and went out and fought on the 14th. That is, of course, a separate story, because till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the Marathas were winning the battle. And a stray shot hit Vishwas Rao, the Peshwa's son. He was killed, and the entire army suddenly began to flee. So half the Maratha army fled, and the remaining half was encircled, which is the place where Sadashirao Bhau was killed, Vishwas Rao was killed, Shamsher Bahadur, Bajirao's son with Mastani, was killed. 27 other chiefs were killed in that battle. And a whole lot of non-combatants were killed after that. They were beheaded, and their heads were kept up in a pile before all the tents of the chiefs of Abdali's army. So this was the treatment which you find given to the Maratha army after they had surrendered to him. So there's a big setback. The advances which had taken place from 1720 to 1760, capturing most of the provinces in the north and controlling Delhi, was suddenly lost in one day. And this pushed the Marathas south of the Chambal. In Pune, you find that Hyder Ali became very strong in the south. The Nizam began to march towards Pune. Nana Sahib Peshwa, who was ailing for quite some time, he died 6 months after Panipat. And in 1763, 2/3 of the houses in Pune were burnt by the Nizam. So there are several graphic letters which describe the destruction which Pune went through in 1763 when the Nizam came and attacked here. And finally, in 1763 August, he was defeated. The Nizam was defeated at Rakshas Bhuvan, a place on the Godavari, and he was forced to cede several large territories, which even more than what were gained at Udgir. And for the next 30 years, you find the Nizam totally quiescent and not disturbing the Marathas after that. That was the time of Madhavrao Peshwa. But there was also a civil war brewing at that time. Madhavrao uncle, who was Raghunath Rao, was also a very ambitious person. He wanted to be the man behind the throne. And so that civil war went on. Now, this period of 11, 12 years of Madhavrao was spent in regaining what was lost and regaining the Maratha position to the pre-Panipat period. So you find that he goes on 3 or 4 campaigns in the south. Hyder Ali is defeated 3 or 4 times. In the last battle in 1771, at the Battle of Moti Talao, just north of Srirangapatnam, the defeat of Hyder Ali's son Tipu is so much that they have to run away from there disguised as beggars. And in the north, he sends an army in 1769, which goes and captures Delhi. Now, Delhi has been without an emperor from 1758. The last emperor, Alamgir II, was assassinated in 1758. His son runs away from Delhi and goes towards Allahabad, where after losing a few battles with the English, you find he's a refugee in the Allahabad fort with the East India Company. And he's pleading with them, take me back to Delhi. And for the next 8 or 9 years, they refuse to take him back. They keep advancing some kind of reasons for not being able to take him back. So in 1771, when the Marathas captured Delhi, the 4 Maratha commanders who captured it, Mahatji Shinde is one of them. And he's just beginning his career as chief of the Scindia family. He writes to the emperor that I will place you on the throne of Delhi once again. That is Shah Alam II. And in exchange for that, he takes some territory, that he will give an annual grant, and all these promises were taken from him. And then he was escorted back and placed on the throne of Delhi. And then Najib Khan, who was instrumental in the death of nearly 3 Scindia family chiefs, he was dead by that time. His son was in Pathargarh, a fort near Najibabad. So the Shah Alam, along with Scindia, crosses over, attacks Pathargarh. They have found old Maratha loot which was captured in Panipat. There are women and other men who were prisoners. They were all rescued at that time. The entire fort was ransacked. So that happened in 1771. Part of the loot is given to Shah Alam, part of it is taken by the Marathas. So this was actually what places the Marathas in control of Delhi once again after a 10-year gap when they were not in control. And Then in 1784, you find that Mahatji Shinde is actually, because in between what happens is Narayan Rao Peshwa is assassinated in 1773. And it is the first Anglo-Maratha war which takes place 1774 to 1782. So this war actually ends in nearly a stalemate. The English are defeated once near Pune at Talegaon. And in 1782, a stalemate is finally there. Both sides were tired of war and the treaty signed in 1782-83. Hyder Ali was the only person who kept on fighting the English near Madras. And when the Maratha signed a treaty, he is forced to kind of acquiesce with that. His death in December 1783 brings Tipu Sultan to the throne. And Tipu Sultan, because he feels that his father has been let down by the Marathas, begins attacking the Maratha territories in the north and attacking the English forces towards the east. Now, had this person been a statesman like his father, and rather than opening two fronts of battle against the English and the Marathas, taking of their territories and expanding his kingdom, making them both his enemies, it was a logical consequence of this kind of behavior that both of them got together against Tipu Sultan. And therefore, 1790, a treaty signed in Pune between the Nizam, the English, and the Marathas against Tipu Sultan. And in 1792, just 8 years he had this period when he actually ruled as an independent ruler. He's defeated at Srirangapatnam, and two of his sons are taken as hostage. And his territories are taken over partly by the 1/3 by the English, 1/3 by the Nizam, and 1/3 by the Marathas. And a very small area around Mysore is left with. Now, had he remained at that state within himself, he would have been still able to carry on. But he started soliciting the help of the French and communicating with them, sending his ambassadors there, basically to fight against the English, which was something the English could not. And therefore, the 1799 battle again was fought and Tipu was killed in that. But in the meanwhile, in Pune, you find after the defeat of Tipu Sultan in 1792, there were 3 years of peace until the Nizam again refused to give his dues, which were pending for a long time. And they have a battle at Kharda in Marathwada, where he's defeated. And few months after that, the young Peshwa, who is just 20 years of age, he falls or he commits suicide in the Shaniwarwada, falling off the 3rd story, and he has got no children. And the only children who are there are the children of Raghunath Rao, who had actually gone over to the English and fought with the Marathas. So now these two children, Bajirao II, who was the elder son of Raghunath Rao, was actually in prison when Savai Madhurao died. And Nana Fadnis was the man at the helm, he was the regent of the Maratha kingdom, and he opposed the bringing of Bajirao II to the throne. Mahatji Shinde was dead by that time. Tukoji Holkar was dead. Ahilya Devi Holkar was dead. All the senior men on the field had gone away. And a youngster who had taken over from Mahatji, Daulat Rao Shinde, was 15 or 16 years of age. He decided to have a treaty with Bajirao II that if I put you on the throne, you will pay me 2 crore rupees. Bajirao had no money, no army, and nor was he trained for war. But he wanted to be the Peshwa because he was next in line. We were living in a very feudal society. Father succeeded by son. Not the most able man doesn't become the prime minister. So he wanted to be the next Peshwa. Taking the help of Daulat Rao becomes the Peshwa. But there is anarchy thereafter in Pune. So there's civil war at the very top. In taking advantage of this, you find the English making advances. First thing, they defeat Tipu. They take the Nizam into their alliance. And the Maratha power, which is left, is totally encircled on all sides by an advancing, aggressive British power. And that time, Lord Mornington comes as a viceroy, his brother Arthur Wellesley comes in the south. And these two brothers decide that we will now take over the Maratha kingdom. And that leads to the Treaty of Vasai, which the Peshwa is forced to sign to get back his Gaddi in Pune, from where he's removed when Holkar attacks Pune. So these are very complicated periods. I'll have to rush through them because it's impossible to describe all this in detail. 1803, the Second Anglo-Maratha War is fought between the Scindias and the English at Aligarh, at Delhi, at Agra, at Laswari, and at Asai. 5 major battles, and one at Gavilgarh in Vidarbha. 6 major battles are fought. And there's a wonderful book written by a Cambridge scholar called Randolph Cooper, where he describes how Maratha army was better, the Scindia army, because Scindia army had been modernized in Mahatji's time. And unfortunately, the commanders of Sindhya Army were mostly Europeans. And these Europeans, on the eve of the battle, they deserted them and went on to the other side. And that is what led to the Maratha defeat in these 5 battles, one after the other. 1803, the Scindias, Holkars was defeated 2 years later because he decided to fight separately because he was not getting along with Scindia. So these kind of internal, so I would say the Maratha power mostly imploded rather than was defeated by somebody else. Had they fought in a united manner, the result could well have been something different. So 1803 onwards, the Marathas become a subsidiary force to the English. And 1817-1818, the Third Anglo-Maratha War was fought by the Peshwa and the Bhosles of Nagpur, essentially to overthrow the English. But it was a very feeble effort because they didn't have the army, they didn't have the trained generals. And even then, it did take about 7 to 8 months for the English to finally get their hands on the Peshwa and pension him off to the north. So he was sent off to Bithur, where he lived for the 30 years. And then his son Rana Sahib Peshwa and Rani Lakshmi Bai was again brought up at his place. Tatya Tope was brought up at Bithur. All these people were instrumental in fighting the 1857-1858 war. So that is the saga of the entire Maratha period. You find that if you look back in history over the last 800 years, this is the kingdom which actually was the first indigenous empire of India after probably 5 centuries. And it was again the last indigenous empire of India before the British took over. So if you look at your history in the last 800 years, this is the period where we have an indigenous power spreading over from Peshawar to Tanjore and from Gujarat to the Maratha ditch of Calcutta. Now, having said all these things, I will also say that history is like a river, it keeps flowing. You cannot freeze it in time. You cannot say that now we have reached this state and this is the rules by which you are going to live and this is not going to change. It can never happen that way because there are living people here who are dictating the course of events that are going to take place. So in the last 75 years, you have seen changes taking place. Like the river flows, the sharper streams cut through newer rock. The pendulum swings one way, then it swings the other. So we are witness to all these, what's happening in India in the last 75 years. And this is the course history normally takes. One cannot accept, and history is always rewritten because the perspective is changing. So that has to be accepted. And therefore, I would say that the 18th century was the century of the Marathas. And this has been kind of brushed under the carpet by several English language authors. Most of them are unable to read Marathi. They are unable to read Marathi sources. And they usually tiptoe around the Maratha period. They are not familiar with what actually happened there. Therefore, if you try to read books by English authors who are not familiar with these documents which have been published only in Marathi, you find this kind of picture that only peripheral things are taken into consideration, or what is already published in secondary sources are taken into consideration. So it was the English won their Raj from the Marathas and not from the Mughals. That is what is not sufficiently understood. If you go to the Noida golf course, there is a huge plaque there of the victory with the East India Company won over the Marathas and captured Delhi. So this is often lost sight of, and it is the history textbooks teach you as if the Mughals were ruling and then the Battle of Plassey took place and the English Empire started, which is far from the truth. That is why the Maratha Century. Thank you all for patient hearing and for spending the Sunday evening with me.
Thank you. Mukul, you and Satish Dogrekar, now raise the questions that you have. Mukul will do it first and then Satish will come.
Okay.
Oh, you are there.
Somebody wants to say something?
1 minute. Satish Dogrekar is taking over now. Satish Dogrekar.
Just to unmute.
Satish?
Is to unmute.
Unmute you. Can't be heard.
You need to unmute.
Yeah. Can I share the screen with my questions, or who wants to go first? I mean,
Please go ahead, Mr. Zubair.
okay.
If you can do without sharing the screen, go ahead. It would be better. It'll be quicker.
Yeah, I'm trying to share the screen.
No, but just ask the questions. You don't
Just
have
ask
to
the
share
questions.
screen.
Just
ask
ask
the
the question. Okay. I'll ask you the question. You begin your book with the fly on the wall.
Yeah,
Now,
that is the Madhavrao book.
the book that you have, the first line, I mean, your intent there was to
No,
basically say
that is not the Maratha Century. You're talking of the next book, the Mastery of Hindustan.
correct. Okay. So, so when you write fly on the wall, were you basically saying that as a historian, you would always stay emotion free? Is that what you were exactly
Yeah.
implying?
First thing is that let it be very clear that history cannot be without bias. Nobody can write history without bias. Because history is always a reflection of your mind. And you may try to be dispassionate about it, but eventually you will get involved in what you write. So you try to be dispassionate, look at it from without getting involved in the events. But eventually somewhere, some amount of bias will creep in.
Okay. Our other question is, I have some other questions. Gopika Bai was deeply involved in the administration. Now the Peshwa women have been acknowledged to be relatively literate for their time. Now, how charitable is this perception?
No, all the Maratha women, not just the Peshwa women. You write if you start looking at the Maratha women who made their mark in Maratha history, you have to start from Shivaji's mother, who actually sculpted his personality, from Jizabai. Then you have to come to Tarabai, who fought Aurangzeb all alone for 7 years, 1700 to 1707. Then you have to come to Radhabai, who was Bajirao's mother and who influenced Maratha politics till 1753, till she died. Then, of course, there is Gopika Bai, who was Nana Sahib's wife, who was again a very influential person. Then you come to Parvati Bai, Sadashivarao's Bhau's wife, who refused to accept that my husband has died in battle and continued to wear all the insignia of being a Saubhagyavati, which was a revolutionary thing to do in those days. Then you right up to Ahilya Devi Holkar or right up to Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, you find the Maratha women have always played an equal part in all the events that take place, and they were always a very strong. There's Mastani, who rode stirrup to stirrup with Bajirao. So this was not, I mean, the culture in Maharashtra has never been to kind of, women were never in Parda, or they were never a second-rate, they were never in the second-rate category of people.
Okay.
Though there were some customs like sati, which were prevalent in society in those days, but it was not compulsory to go sati. It was a voluntary thing.
Yeah, I mean, actually, sati was least one of the areas where sati was least practiced was Maharashtra.
Mostly Bengal and Punjab were the more
Bengal
common.
And correct. I have another question. Like Chhatrapati came out with the idea of Swarajya. He even launched Rajya Vyavahar Kosh, right? It's a dictionary of Marathi words.
Yeah.
Because he really wanted to went to local literature. Now, how prevalent was this idea of Swarajya across the political map of India?
Basically, it requires a man and an idea, and the time of the idea has to come. I mean, you find Chhatrasal coming down to the Deccan and asking Chhatrapati Shivaji that, can I join you in this battle? And Chhatrapati Shivaji advising him, go back and fight for independence in your own state. So this was there, but now states which are very close to Delhi, which were easily subdued by the Mughals, they found it that much more difficult to fight back against any, like Aurangzeb faced probably 22 or 23 rebellions, if you go through his career, out of which the Maratha revolt, if you want to call it that, was the only one which was successful in his own lifetime.
Okay. I have now two questions. It is principally believed that the power transfer was from Mughals to British. And this belief persists despite the successful campaign by the Peshwas. Now, how successful has your work been in neutralizing this misplaced belief?
No, it's a work in progress. I'm just a drop in the ocean.
Progress. Okay.
I'm just a drop in the ocean.
Okay,
it's entrenched for the last 75 years. You can't change it overnight.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, another thing is
popular perceptions are there.
Okay, why were the Marathas hesitant to finish off the Nizam once and for all? Because they had lost the the battle at Bhopal, they had lost the battle at
It
Palkhed.
is easier said than done, because the Nizam was defeated at Palkhed and at Bhopal with his entire army intact. So if push would have come to Shah, he would have fought back. He had a very strong artillery which was still intact, but he was starving at both places, Palkhed as well as Bhopal. His
Okay.
supplies were cut off by Bajirao.
Okay.
So it was a temporary situation created which forced him to surrender at that point in time. But he was very much, his army remained intact. He was finally defeated in Nana Sahib's time, 1750s, in several battles, in whether it's Sindkhed, whether it's Udgir, later on at Rakshas Bhavan. That is when his power was decisively finished, but not in the first Nizam-ul-Mulk's time.
Okay.
The first Nizam-ul-Mulk remained a strong power as long as he lived. So to finish him was not easy. Besides, Shahu was not keen to do that. Shahu had sent a letter that Nizam should not be finished.
Okay.
Can we ask Alka
I mean, I have
Alka
Yeah,
Zogarkar
just
is
one
next.
sec.
I
Yeah,
have only one
Alka,
last question. I have only one
Alka's
last
question.
hand has been up
Satish,
for
and
quite
then
some
Alka.
time.
and so has mine.
Can we-
Yeah, and then yours, and the
Mukul?
Kothari also there. All
Okay, I
are
have just one last question. What has been the reaction from historians? Are there any witty or cutting rejoinders from other historians?
I didn't get the question.
What has been the reaction from other historians to your books? Any witty or cutting rejoinders?
Yeah, nowadays I think historians are divided into two camps. Depends who's reading your book.
Okay.
So I tried to toe the central line or the factual line. It is difficult to stay exactly in the center. You will always offend somebody because it's a very passionate subject. Everybody is very passionately attached to history, and especially if it's your own history. And nowadays it's also gone along communal lines. So there is going to be a lot of passion involved. You can't
Okay,
please
thank you.
everybody. You're going to
Yeah, thank
displease
you.
someone.
Can I interrupt? I think Deepak Kothari has been raising his hands all the while. Deepak?
I've been raising mine for so long.
Oh, yes, you're there. You're there.
Mukul also, yes,
Alka
and
is also there.
Alka. And Swami also now.
Okay.
So,
Deepak, go ahead.
Okay, so my question was, just as an observation, the British coming from so far away, and it was a British East India Company, which is a private corporation, and they're fighting battles here with very few British people. And I'm trying to understand, how is it that they were able to raise these armies? Well, they're all basically mercenaries, or how they were so successful in doing this.
For one, in the early part of the 18th century, the British army was not stronger than they recruited local people. They gave them good salary. There were no arrears of pay. They gave them pension. They gave them, if they've got injured, they gave them some kind of an injury allowance and so on. So they had good, people joined them because everybody was not imbibed with a nationalistic fervor. And as you go further into the 18th century, and as the opposition to the Marathas becomes weaker and weaker, and as the oppression becomes weaker and weaker, that national feeling which is there, that nationalistic feeling which is there, as it is, we were in a pre-nation state. I mean, if one army goes to another region of India, as it understand it today, they did not think that they are attacking another part of their own countrymen. It was a different region under a different king. They had to put pressure on that king, so they attacked those places. Or they had to destroy the resources which can help an army of an enemy army. So, like today, the army follows a scorched earth policy. They don't want the army to get its supplies. They cut off the supplies. They burn the granaries. So this was the accepted practice. So the villages are bound to be accepted. I mean, this is collateral damage today in Central Asia. You are seeing the same thing happening. Civilians are as badly hurt. Now, as far as joining the British army, the Indians joining the British army, you'll find that Purbiyas and Telingas and so on have been part of the British army. The British army which fought at Buxar had not only Telingas and Purbiyas fighting with them, but they had elements of the British army, the proper British army. The victories won by Robert Clive and Admiral Watson when he took back Calcutta, or he defeated the French at Chandernagore in Bengal in 1757-58, were fought with the help of the Royal Navy. The entire Royal Navy with top of the line ships came to India, and they remained here for 5 years. In 1721, when the battles were taking place here, there were actually British army itself which was fighting it. It was not just East India Company troops. So the British army is very important against the popular perception, against what several authors say that the East India Company and a corporate company took over the India on its own. It didn't happen that way. At crucial phases of the conquest of India, you find the British Army itself and the Royal Navy, then the most powerful navy in the world, have been spending years and years in India. So it was on their back that actually this victory was won, and the East India Company is very closely aligned with the British Parliament. And they were getting all the support they wanted from their from the Parliament and the army and the navy of their country. As far as joining the English army was concerned, the Telingas or Purviyas or whoever joined their army, they never thought that we are going to lose our independence in this manner. For one, it was like today in India, you're joining an Indian company versus a multinational company. So it was a multinational company operating in India, probably paying better pay more regularly on the first of the month, taking care of your injuries, your pensions, taking care of your family better than what the Indian armies were doing. So in 1803, in the Second Anglo-Maratha War, Randolph Cooper in his book mentions that the English East India Company had taken over the military market at that time. It was a preferred employer. Ultimately, finally, when you take up a job, you're looking at your family and your own interests. So the people who joined those forces were actually not looking at the nationwide point of view. The local Rajas, there are two brothers fighting for the Gaddi after their fathers died. The English support one guy, prop him out and put him there. He's grateful to those guys. Now this model was adopted even by the Marathas. For example, in the battle for the Gaddi of Jaipur, when Ishwari Singh and Madhav Singh were fighting with each other. So this was a repeated model, and then those Rajas were captured. The British controlled India through the Rajas of various subas. Even later on, after 1857, the Rajas were allowed to rule in their territory. There was a resident over there who observed the rule and who kind of made all the rules. And he made sure that they follow the dictates of the East India Company. Otherwise, a small army would come and put him in his place, or remove him and put his brother in his place.
Uday, I think we'll have
Thank
two
you.
questions.
Just
Only two people
one follow-up.
Alka Jogrekar first, and Mukul will take over, and
Yeah.
then we'll end it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr.
I
Kulkarni,
think
for
Mr. Sundaram also is waiting.
Oh, Sundaram also. Okay. Swami,
Okay.
you are next also. After Kumud. After
No,
Mukul.
after more.
First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Kulkarni. It was a fascinating lecture. And actually, I've read your other books, and I had given a lecture on Peshwas called the Brahmin Warriors. So I had delved a lot in your earlier books. I have two questions. One, of course, is I listened to some video somewhere where somebody asked Mr. Shashi Tharoor that if the British hadn't come, would it have been a Maratha Empire instead of a British Empire? So that is my first question. What do you think about that? And the second thing which I want to say is that the actual fighting was done by the Peshwas, but I think the credit goes to the Maratha kings for choosing the right people and for giving them support instead of actually fighting, because normally the king is the one who fights. But here, it's not even the Senapati. Initially, it was the prime minister. The first Peshwa was the Senapati to start with, I think, or maybe he wasn't. This was the prime minister in the beginning. But that, I think, is a credit to the Maratha kings to choose the right people and to let them go forward. What do you think about that?
The Peshwa, actually, Nana Sahib Peshwa was not a warrior. For example, Bajirao was a warrior, more of a general than an administrator. And Madhavrao was a mix of both. Actually, in Madhavrao's time, the king had taken a back seat. So practically all the decisions of war, when to go to war, when to make peace, were all left to the Peshwa at that time. So these were all varying patterns. But as you'll find that something like the shogun in Japan, the Peshwa was like the shogun. And when the Peshwai ended with the death of Madhavrao, practically, the four Peshwas, when it ended, and it went to the hand of ministers and generals after that. So you find that first the Chhatrapati lost power. Chhatrapati Shahu may not go to battle himself, but he had a very strong moral control over the entire empire. And that was lost with his death. And because he didn't have any son to take over after him. And there was a lot of circumstances because of which the next person who came was not able to exercise control. So this kind of, as it kept going downwards, Nana Fadnis may have got all the goodwill of the empire in his mind that, oh, what Daulat Rao Shinde is doing is wrong. but he is not the Peshwa or the king, and he doesn't have an army to back up what he wants to do. So this way, it was more of an implosion, I would say, of the Maratha setup than somebody from outside coming and doing it to us. They imploded by their own mistakes and their own infighting. Because when the external enemy disappeared, they start fighting among themselves for whatever are the spoils of war, or that kind of attitude was there. So they lost the national vision, which was which was from Chhatrapati Shivaji's time. It kept on kind of getting diluted till finally nothing was left.
Okay, Mukul, please speak, and then I think Swami Sundaram will be the last person.
Yeah, Dr. Kulkarni, are there no Persian accounts of this period? Because I have not seen that in your book. And also, you've quoted extensively from British sources and from Marathi, of course,
No,
letters.
there are plenty of Persian sources I have quoted.
Of this period, or for this book.
This book is basically, I'll tell you what, there are no references given at the end of the book, because this is a quick reading, a light reading. All other books which I've written have got in-depth references given, notes given. So several Persian sources have been used. The most important Persian source is the Siyar al-Mutakharin, which is a Persian source translated to English long back by an English gentleman. There's 4 big volumes of those. But for example, now Jadunath Sarkar translated something called the Deccan Chronicle.
Yes.
Now he labeled it the Deccan Chronicle, and I've quoted it extensively in my Nana Sahib and Madhavrao books. And that gives a day-by-day events of what happened in Delhi. It's practically a calendar, daily events which are there, newsletters. Today so-and-so came to the Badshah, he did this.
Correct.
He was watching a fight between an elephant and a lion from the Khidki at the Riti of Jamuna. So all these narratives are there. So-and-so came and offered him a reward of some nazar of so-and-so thing. So-and-so was killed. This fellow was... All these things are there in the Delhi Chronicle. So all these are used, but they are not referred to in this book. But as I said, this book, if I
is an
start
overview. Okay.
Yes.
And nobody else thought of Swaraj, just like you say that it began with Shivaji, this whole concept. The Rajputs or anyone else, nobody else thought of sort of
They fought and were defeated. That is the thing. Now Rana Pratap, of course, he wanted a Swaraj, but it requires a head to plan and a hand to execute, which is what Grand Duff says of Baji Rao. But that is true for every ruler. I mean, you may want your Swaraj and you want to have your own self-rule, but you must be able to execute it. Chhatrasal wanted it, but he couldn't do it as long as Aurangzeb was there. So these people all wanted their independence and their freedom. Even the Marathas, when they went north, even then they resisted Maratha power from coming there because they had to pay them an annual chauth for for being protected. So nobody likes any kind of supervision, whether it's supervision or whether you have to pay a fee for your protection, somebody else is looking after your defense needs. So that nobody will like.
No, what I mean is you have associated this concept of Swaraj only with the Marathas, not with anybody else who might. This word you have not associated.
Yes, this word was used by the 2 people whom I mentioned. One is Chhatrapati Shivaji, one was Lokmanya Tilak. But the desire must have been there in all these people to be independent, but they could not achieve it.
Okay.
Okay, I think the last call now. Swami is there. Swami.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for the enlightening us all on this period. I really enjoyed it. But putting the war and the politics aside, what was the legacy of the Marathas in arts and culture?
Yes.
For, they were 200 years.
If you go to the city of Varanasi today, almost 90% of the temples and the ghats which you see there today have been built by the Marathas, not by anybody else. Whether it's the Bhosla Ghat, the Shinde Ghat, the Peshwe Ghat, the Raja Ghat, the Ganesh Ghat.
Wow.
They're all the Marathas. There's only one Man Singh Ghat there you find and one Chait Singh Ghat, which was built by the Raja of Banaras. You go to Dashashwamedh Ghat, you'll find a plaque at the beginning of the entrance saying this was built by Balaji Bajirao, Nana Sahib Peshwa. So from 1730s onwards, there was money being sent from Pune to Maratha money lenders who were stationed in Kashi, and there are innumerable letters where they say that we have bought this place for you, we are going to make this ghat here, we are going to do this thing. So, there was a civilizational and a cultural change. What you see today in the Kashi, just an example, Ahilya Devi Holkar built the present Kashi Vishwanath temple. If this period of indigenous rule had not appeared between the Mughal period and the British period, what you see today in places like Kashi would not have been seen.
What about the south? What about
The south, thanks to the Vijayanagar kingdom, the south was largely preserved. But even then you find a lot of instances of during Aurangzeb's march right up to the Kaveri, during Hyder and Tipu's time, there are several examples of iconoclasm which you find there. So that happened, but much of the south was protected, and today also you find the south has remained far more conservative than the north, because it has been till 1565 at least the Vijayanagar kingdom was there to protect it. South of the Tungabhadra.
Uday,
I just want to
there
add
are
one
more
thing.
people asking questions.
No, I
Satish
just want to
Jogrekar
add one
still
thing.
wants to answer.
Yeah.
Still
I just
wants
want to add
answer,
one
Satish.
thing. The Tanjore paintings were basically started by Shivaji's stepbrother. He was basically instrumental in starting Tanjore paintings.
Yes.
And the trustee of the Tanjore temple is still a Bhosle.
Yeah.
His name
Yeah,
is
now, most of it is taken
Chief-
over by the government. The Saraswati
But-
Mahal and also it's under the government now. They are
Yeah, but
nominally.
the trustee of the temple is still a fellow called Bhosle.
Yes.
And
But there are
of course, there's
two
been,
brothers. There are two brothers there who are the descendants of Tanjavur Maharaja, who are
Yeah.
staying in the palace there. But they are honorary trustees. Like the Peshwa here is
Yes.
the trustee of the Parvati temple in Pune.
yes,
But that's basically a government-run organization.
sure. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think Uday, that's the last of the questions. Mohini, would you like to say something?
Yeah, my goodness. I mean, this was phenomenal. It
Saturated.
really was. Dr.
Overdose.
Kulkarni,
Seriously, it was.
I mean, you
Right.
are a fund of knowledge. Truly, I mean, it's a lot to take in because much of it was not known, to me at least. I don't know how the others reacted, but it is marvelous, to see your scholarship, your love for your subject, it's wonderful. And it makes me so proud, to hear about the Marathas. And what a pity what you said about the dilution of that passion for Swarajya towards the end. What a pity. And when you use that.
As I tell everybody, every empire has got a shelf life. Expect it to last forever is wrong.
True, very true. And history has taught us that. And that word implosion that you used, that they imploded. That's it. Yes, indeed.
In fact, let me add that something else, I was at IIM Calcutta, and we had an excellent history professor called Dr. Barun De. And Dr. Barun De told me one kissa he was talked about was that children were put to sleep in Bengal by saying, the Marathas are coming, the Marathas are coming. And the kids would quieten down immediately. Oh, I didn't even know that this was there. The small little thing suddenly came up that, wow, this is something we didn't know at all here. Mo, go ahead. I think finalize
yes.
it.
So I guess it's time to wind up. It has been a wonderful session. Very, very productive, very rewarding, very stimulating. And the questions that came, and I know that more people would want to ask questions, but we can't go on forever, folks. So sorry and all that. And let me say my round of thank yous now. So first of all, Dr. Kulkarni, thank you so very much.
Mohini, just my 10-year-old grandson from US, he raised his hand for a question. Can you allow him one?
Oh, yes,
most definitely.
Where's a 10-year-old?
Put him on. Put him on.
I typed my question in the chat. It's right.
Put in the chat.
It's in the chat?
Yeah, it's in the chat.
So what is it? What are the questions?
So the Marathas are known for their bravery and their success and war, but did they have great artistic and musical accomplishments?
About musical, I won't know. They were in the latter parts, the Maratha Renaissance, if you want to call it that, came fairly late. Because you find that all points in time, they were busy fighting their enemies. It was only in the 1790s that you find a certain renaissance coming into the Maratha period, when they start thinking of getting nice paintings made, and they start embellishing their palaces with something beautiful and so on. But that lasted for all the povadas which you read today, all the povadas, the ballads of the Marathas, all those ballads came up in the 1790s to 1820 because they came under the patronage of the latter Peshwas. And the latter Peshwas, especially Bajirao II, because he didn't have much of governing or fighting to do. He was earning his revenue and saving it. He had plenty of time to support these artists and these dancers and these dancers. There used to be a plethora of dancers who were in his darbar. So this music and dance actually flowered in that last period when actually the Maratha rule was in a decadent, leading to a decadent state. That is when they came up. As far as building opulent palaces, the Marathas were never interested in those kind of palaces which you see in the north. And nor were they very ostentatious as far as their dress is concerned. There are several English authors who comment that they are always dressed in a very simple way and probably just have a single pearl necklace around their neck. And generally, that thought never entered their mind that they'll build magnificent palaces, which you find in Rajasthan or in Delhi and so on. Unfortunately, what happens today, you tend to look at history when you look at a monument. So if you see a monument, you say, oh, this must have been built by some king. And you start looking at what that king did. So, but you don't have anything except if you go and see the 350 or 500 forts of Maharashtra, which were also blasted by the British because they didn't want anybody to use them. You won't find much of Maratha monuments today existence because they never built them. Either they were made of wood, so they burned down, but that leaving a lasting mark on the architectural mark like the Mughals did or the Rajputs did, that was never the aim. And they never had the respite to do it.
Yes, do you think that's part of the Maharashtrian character? You know, I don't think we go in so much for opulence and show.
Oh, now we are changing.
Very, very true.
Yeah,
very, very
I know. Yes,
Okay.
but I always thought of the Marathi Manus as somewhat slightly ascetic, very well disciplined.
The Maratha Mansa's breathe Vakya, if you want to call it, the motto is Apla Bua Asa Hai.
Apla Bua Asa Hai. Okay.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you. I mean,
why did the British want to not propagate this history? They were so scared that 200 years later, the Marathas would rise up again.
They were always scared. After 1818, after 1857, they made a concerted effort to destroy the forts. The sappers, the engineers used to go to each fort and say that if you destroy this wall from this point to this point, this fort cannot be defended and you will not face any more rebellions there. There are papers. I've got some papers from the British Library which actually have got diagrams of how the fort should be destroyed. So what you see of the forts today, these solid forts built of basalt, could not have just fallen down. They were systematically demolished so that they don't become shelters for rebels.
Okay.
Satish, I would say one thing.
Who's
Deepak
speaking?
was,
Arvind.
Yeah.
Go on, Arvind.
Those of us who went to Marathi schools, we learned a lot more about this period, and we read many books in Marathi by many historians and otherwise. And of course, we didn't know as much as Uday knows, but I think the English-speaking schools taught history as written by the English only. Marathi schools had a lot more, so our exposure was much greater. And the quote you said, putting children to sleep, Marathas are coming, all those we knew in school.
It is also, I think, it is also regional. I think because you studied in Maharashtra, I studied in Delhi. So we learned Mughal history. We had just probably a couple of pages on Chhatrapati Shivaji and more about how he escaped from Agra. That is what I remember of that.
I'd like to contradict you there. If you've done college in Maharashtra, from the first year of college till last year of MA, you do nothing but Shivaji and the Peshwas, Shivaji and the Peshwas. So yes, it is there, but it's at college level. If you take that as a specialized subject, which is what I experienced.
And I think, Uday, there are many more questions. I will not, I'll catch you sometime and over something different. We can sit down and talk about the points I have also, which I will not put it all onto you. But Mohini, a vote of thanks for him.
Yes.
Please.
Oh my.
I think she's already done that.
Heartfelt. I mean, wonderful presentation, excellent, I mean, information, so much information. I can't pretend to be able to remember all of it, but, you know, it's been fantastic listening to you. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
Do come again. This is your second time with us. It should not be the last time. I would also like to thank Mukul and Satish Zoglekar for clearly from their questions, I see that they have been thinking and possibly reading your books. So thank you for their contribution. Thank you, all of you, you know, for your participation, your interest. And let me remind you that this session is recorded and it will be put on the group. So none of us can pretend to be able to remember every fact that Dr. Kulkarni has given us. We can listen to the recording. All right, let's do that. Thank you very much.
There's one more request from Deepak Kotwal. That why don't you have tours of this, you know, where about history, Maratha history? Why can't we have proper tours of what happened in this era, etc., telling a story about it? It will be worth the while.
Actually, I'm trying to tell it through my books. Actually,
I know.
Physically, it's very tiring and it's a huge area to cover.
There are already
young people you saw would be very much interested in that.
Satish, there are already tours in Pune which talk about at least Pune history, not the whole of Maratha history. There are tours in Shanwarwada or in and around about Peshwas.
Heritage walk and all that. Yeah.
Okay. I think Moini,
so thank you. And let me just mention what we're having next time. So next time is the 23rd of April. Now, we did decide that the book club would meet twice a month, but there's 3 sessions this month because we just got these good authors coming to us and we welcomed them, you know, with open arms. Now, on the 23rd, we have 2 authors again. We have Manisha Singh, who's written a book called The 10th Story, which is about women and their experiences and so on. And the other writer is Ruby Gupta, who's written a mystery novel, The Secret of Leifang Pagoda. And Sunita Shetty is going to be in conversation with both these authors, one after the other, because the 2 books are entirely different from each other. Okay, so we look forward to having you with us on the 23rd. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Hope to see you again. Dr. Kulkarni, once more, hats off to you and that terrific presentation. Thank you.
And thank you, Chetan. I'm glad you came.